July 1518. A woman named Frau Trophea stepped onto a narrow street in Strasbourg, and then she began to dance. Not for joy, not for celebration. She twisted, she convulsed. Her feet slammed against the cobblestones until they split open. She danced for 6 days. On the 7th day, 20 more joined her. By the end of the month, hundreds were dancing, and none of them could stop, not even when their bones snapped, not even when their hearts burst. They danced until they died. Strasbourg, 1518, the Holy Roman Empire, a city built on centuries of blood and prayer. But by that summer, something had already gone terribly wrong. Famine had hollowed out the poor. A mysterious sweating sickness had filled the cemeteries, and the harvest had turned black with rot. The people of Strasbourg believed God had abandoned them, or worse, that something else had arrived in his place. Her name was Frau Trophea, a married woman, probably in her 30s. No one had seen her dance before. No one had heard music, but on that July evening she stepped out of her house, and her body betrayed her. First, her left foot twitched, then her right knee buckled, then her arms lifted without her permission. By midnight, her neighbors heard a sound they would never forget. Not music, not screaming, something in between. The wet, rhythmic slap of bare feet on stone. Again, again, again. She danced through the first night, then the second, then the third. Her husband tried to hold her down. She bit him. The priest came with holy water. She laughed and laughed. On the 4th day, her feet were black. On the 5th, you could see the bones of her toes. On the 6th, she was still dancing. But by then, she was no longer alone. By mid-August, the dancing had become a plague. Not a metaphor, a plague. 34 dancers became 100. 100 became 400. They danced in the streets. They danced in the churches. They danced in their own homes until their families locked them out. And then they danced in the rain, in the mud, in their own blood. The city council convened an emergency meeting. They called in physicians, astrologers, monks. No one had an answer. So they did what terrified people have always done. They looked for someone to blame. The church declared it a curse of Saint Vitus, a holy punishment. According to legend, Saint Vitus had been a Roman martyr who danced before his execution. Now the clergy said his spirit had returned to make the sinners of Strasbourg pay. Their solution? More dancing. They built a wooden stage in the middle of the city. They hired musicians. They believed that if the afflicted danced voluntarily, the curse would break. It did not break. It got worse. This is what happens to a human body that dances for 2 weeks without stopping. First, the feet. Blisters become wounds. Wounds become ulcers. Ulcers expose the tendons. Then the legs. The constant impact fractures the shin bones. But the dancer cannot feel the pain anymore. The brain has stopped listening. So they keep going. The heart, however, does not stop listening. After 10 days of continuous movement, the heart begins to tear its own muscle fibers. And then, the chest. The ribs crack from hyperventilation. The lungs fill with fluid. And finally, the dancer stops. Not because they want to, because something inside them breaks. By September, 50 people had died. Not from poison, not from plague, from dancing. Their bodies simply wore out. And yet, the survivors kept moving. The city chronicler wrote, "They danced until the flesh fell from their bones." You can still read his words today. They are preserved in the archives of Strasbourg, a reminder that sometimes the human body is not a prison. It is a death sentence. The church had a problem. They had called the dancing a holy curse.
The church had a problem.
But if it was holy, Why wouldn't it stop? Why were the prayers failing? Why did the holy water do nothing? Why did the cross make some dancers scream? In secret, the bishops began to whisper a different word, a word they never said aloud: demonic. But if the dancing was demonic, then the church had just commanded thousands of people to dance for the devil, on a stage, with music. You see the problem. So they did what terrified institutions always do. They changed the story. The city council had a decision to make. They had tried prayer. They had tried medicine. They had tried more dancing. Nothing worked. And now, 400 people were dying in the streets. So they chose the only option left. They chose exile. On September 8, 1518, the council issued a decree. All dancers were to be removed from the city, taken to a mountain shrine, and left there. No food, no water, no medicine, just a shrine to St. Vitus and a promise that God would save them. The council knew most would not survive, but the council also knew that corpses do not dance. They called it a pilgrimage, but the dancers knew the truth. They were being thrown away, sent to die somewhere else, so that Strasbourg could pretend the nightmare was over. And for a few weeks, it worked. The streets fell silent. The music stopped. The survivors who remained hid in their homes. But then, in October, a child began to dance. Just one child, in a different part of the city. And the council realized something terrible. You cannot exile a curse. You can only survive it. Historians estimate that by the time the dancing ended in late October, between 50 and 400 people had died. We don't know the exact number. The records stop. They stop because the scribes who were keeping them started dancing too. What we do know is that the final deaths were the worst. Not because they were violent, because they were silent. By the end, the dancers had no strength left to scream, no air left to cry. They just moved until they didn't. One witness wrote, "They fell like wheat before the scythe. First one, then 10, then all of them, and the only sound was the wind." The dancing stopped as suddenly as it had begun. No explanation, no farewell. One morning, the survivors woke up and their feet were still, and no one knew why. No one ever knew why. They just stopped. And then they went back to their lives, or what was left of them, and they never spoke of the dancing again. Except, some of them did, in their sleep. Their neighbors would hear them at night, the sound of feet, the sound of dancing, coming from inside locked rooms, coming from inside their dreams. For 500 years, no one could explain the dancing plague. Then, in the 20th century, a theory emerged: ergot poisoning. Ergot is a fungus that grows on wet rye, the same rye that 16th century peasants baked into their bread. Ergot produces a chemical very similar to LSD. In large doses, it causes convulsions, hallucinations, a burning sensation in the limbs. Some historians believe the people of Strasbourg ate poisoned bread, that they didn't choose to dance, that the fungus chose for them. It's a clean theory, neat, scientific. There's just one problem. Ergot poisoning causes the limbs to twist and spasm, but it does not cause coordinated dance. It does not cause hundreds of people to move in the same rhythm. It does not cause the dancing to spread from person to person like a virus. Ergot explains the convulsions. It does not explain the synchronization. It does not explain why a woman danced alone for 6 days before anyone joined her. It does not explain why the dancing stopped when the dancers were removed from the city. And it does not explain this. The second theory is the one that scares scientists the most. Mass psychogenic illness. Mass hysteria. You've seen it before. School children fainting in unison. Factory workers suddenly convulsing. A group of people sharing a delusion. The brain is a social organ. It is designed to sync with other brains. When one person believes something strongly enough, the people around them begin to believe it too. In 1518, the people of Strasbourg already believed they were cursed. They already believed God had abandoned them. They were starving. They were terrified. And then, one woman started to dance. And their brains did the only thing brains know how to do. They followed. But mass hysteria has a rule. It only happens in groups that are already under extreme stress. And Strasbourg, in 1518, was not just stressed. It was broken. 3 years of crop failure, a plague that killed children in hours, a church that promised salvation but delivered only fear. The people of Strasbourg didn't need a fungus to make them dance. They needed a reason to feel in control. And dancing, even dancing to death, felt like doing something. Anything. The alternative was to sit still and wait for God to kill them. And that was worse. So which theory is true? Ergot? Hysteria? A curse? The honest answer is that we don't know. And that is the most terrifying answer of all. Because if we don't know what caused the dancing plague of 1518, we don't know if it could happen again. Today, tomorrow, to you. The dancing plague of 1518 was not the first mass dancing epidemic. It was not the last. In 1374, hundreds danced in Aachen. In 1536, children danced through the streets of Basel. In 1962, an entire village in Tanzania began to laugh uncontrollably. Thousands laughed for months. Some laughed until they died. We call these events plagues, epidemics, hysterias. But those are just words we use to make ourselves feel safe. To pretend that what happened in Strasbourg could never happen in a modern city. With electricity, with medicine, with science. But here is the question you will take to bed with you tonight. If the people of Strasbourg could not stop dancing, what makes you so sure that you could stop if something told you to start?